request you to restrict it to 10 minutes. And I'm also sorry, we also won't be having a tea break. Tea and coffee, though, is available in the trade exhibition in the next room. Can we have any questions, please?
The Apollo meeting is, most of it is already solved, because in a cashless situation, the patient is not the one who speaks to the TPA or it's the hospital which is dealing directly with either with us or the TPA. So, patient, but in terms of reimbursement, which is possibly what you're saying, then there might be a different loop. And our own assessment is the quantum of reimbursement claims vis-a-vis cashless claims. The quantum of reimbursement claims is decreasing, and so that's possibly the answer to your question, that it's on its way of reduction and possibly elimination over a period of time. But there will be, and I can't foresee a time where there will be no questions asked. I'm sure there will be, but certainly not of the magnitude which you're talking about. And I see it going more in the direction of cashless, where our thinking, we don't have a solution today, tomorrow, but I've gone on record in the media saying that why should a patient wait? We do it in, I think, 65 minutes, an approval. I'm telling our guys, why can't we do it in 6.5 seconds? So that's the direction in which we're going, but some way to go.
You mean this practice you guys are likely to follow, or already on the records you're following this practice?
Yeah, our cashless approvals are 65 minutes. Directly from hospital to us and back. So it's a long way from where it started, but I'm saying we are not even happy with that. We're saying why not in seconds?
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Good morning. You mentioned that the involvement of the insurance companies. From a reimbursement perspective, is it a fee for service for right now, or is the concept of DRGs something that's being thought about? Just one question. The second question is, you mentioned that the claims management is taking the TPA out of the equation to speed things up. Do you see this to be a trend moving forward? Thank you.
In terms of some of the add-on features and add-on things which we are doing, apart from being just a hospital payer, at the moment, and we see it going free as, in terms of engaging with the customer more and hopefully higher penetration and more customers to us, which should sort of pay for itself. So that's the way it works. In terms of your second question, I don't see TPAs being taken out of the equation at all. I do see a role for them, a significant role. It depends who's using them more or less, but there are different companies with different approaches, and within those approaches there are variations. Now, I gave you an example of how we thought there was an issue in terms of providers, hospitals receiving payments quickly and timely. And that was a pain point when we did our research before we commenced business. So we moved into a situation where we said, okay, let's use technology to bypass that routing and go directly, which was significantly appreciated, and we saw huge value coming out to the provider and to us. And now more and more industry players are using that route. Some players have gone down the route saying, we don't need TPAs, we'll do it entirely ourselves, and that's their choice. But I do see a combination of all of this continuing to happen, but one thing which I definitely see is the standard of operation, the practice being, sort of significantly moving in the right direction in terms of the customer service, any which way you look at it, because there are combinations available. There is real.
Mask bring the saving, or the telemedicine bring the saving. It is said the telemedicine, the cost is just about 1/5 of the physical visit. It's quite a complex and a data-intensive process. What units you use, what are the benefits you are looking at, are the immediate gains, like as I explained you, if the organization is looking at wider gains and social objectives of getting into research, and the cost may be, benefits may be difficult to assign a monetary value immediately. Say that if a research with data analytics can come up with a solution where we can provide customized care to the cancer patient, then the benefits could be immense. So I explained you that there are techniques like net present value, discounted cash flows. The cost utility analysis is the most useful tool we have at our hand, in the economist's hand. So with these tools, we can arrive at least a fairly accurate value, and we can have some idea or a guideline or a framework is there. But of course, again, I would like to say that its accurate estimation is complex and is very data intensive, and one has to take a middle path. Okay.
Companies, Medicare, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, United Health, etc. agreed for reimbursement of telemedicine. It's a sad fact, but the fact remains, what is in it for me? Unless a medical doctor is reimbursed adequately for a teleconsultation, telemedicine is never ever going to take off. And today the world has realized that, particularly in India, telemedicine has to be an integral part of the healthcare delivery system. What are the obstacles in allowing reimbursement by insurance companies for a teleconsultation?
I think the obstacle is there is a problem of plenty for us to do, and that's the obstacle, and it's just about prioritizing what you do when. I think the first phase of the private sector entering the insurance space over the last 10 years has been to look at how do we increase the interest and the penetration of people who are looking at in-hospitalization covers. We, for example, have started one cover which also included a certain amount of outpatient covers, right? So when the moment you start outpatient covers, then the average ticket size for this insurance policy also goes up. Then it comes in terms of affordability, and we are still stuck in a stage where we are trying to increase the awareness of insurance need in the country, basic hospitalization cover. So it's one step at a time, and I really feel, while you're absolutely right, that's the need of the hour, I think we do still have a long way to go in terms of, firstly, increasing the awareness in terms of the need of an insurance product to finance, the awareness in terms of what this is going to cost. The moment you have outpatient, I think it should be understood that the frequency is going to be much higher, the usage is going to be higher, the policy will cost higher. Today, people are, while they're interested in hearing about this, when it comes out to cutting a check, they're still more interested in cutting out amounts like 3 to 5 to 7,000. But the moment we include an outpatient cover, which we attempted, which I would say is failed, because it was an average ticket size was 15,000 rupees, which had a 3 lakh hospitalization cover, plus a 12,000 rupees outpatient, including consultations, not telemedicine consultation, but across the table. But the takers are few because your average ticket size is high. But I'm hoping over a period of time, disposable incomes for the younger generation is increasing. Priority for investing in health insurance come up higher in the ladder in terms of their to buy, and that's the way it will go. But I agree that's the thing to do. But given hospitalization covers, increasing the penetration of that first.
Thank you. As we come to the close of this session, I'd like to thank all the participants and also thank the audience.
In every conference, when we attend a scheme called Healthy Schools, in which we pick up schools which are not financially strong, mostly in the government sector, and go to the schools and conduct a complete health checkup of all the students who are present there. And after it is done, we detect any abnormalities, we do the further treatment and other plans for them. But more importantly, at the end of it all, each school gets a Healthy School certificate. We just awarded about four schools in Hyderabad last week. And as a token of thanks from all of you, each of you will sponsor 5 students, not at your cost. Apollo Hospitals will sponsor it. And this is a certificate that has been given to each of the speakers for this conference. So we will make sure that you get it before you leave at the end of the day. And thank you very much. And this effort, we hope, will go national. And we will soon see a lot more children, because as you all know, it's very important that children are screened at a very young age to detect if there are any problems, and if they are, then treated well. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank all our speakers here for their precious time. Thank you very, very much. And let's head towards the session. We have our chairperson for our second session, Mr. Arjun Rajagopalan. Can I please ask Mr. Arjun to please come on the stage along with the other speakers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, there's something that I would like to request the organizers. It's a terrible thing to deprive an audience of its coffee and toilet breaks, especially at this time of the day when I think attention spans are reached the point where it can be measured in microseconds rather than minutes. Is there some way we could get coffee for everybody here? This way it will do two things. One, it will allow the speakers to speak without half the audience walking away, and it would also wake up the audience. If it's going to be too much of a problem, I wouldn't mind, but if it could be possible, arranging coffee here would be, I think, a great idea for everybody, right? Okay. This session, interestingly, focuses on an aspect that I think is worth looking at. Marshall McLuhan, whom you all know was the philosopher of information technologies, many years ago at the Mehran University of Engineering and Technology in Pakistan. Professor Chowdhury will talk about real-time vital sign monitoring using the NI LabVIEW.
Gentlemen, good morning. The topic of my presentation is real-time vital sign monitoring using NI LabVIEW. So this is National Instrument LabVIEW software that we have utilized this software by measuring 3 parameters of the vital sign. And the NI LabVIEW and data acquisition system, and along with the design of virtual instrument BIs in the user interface, along with methodology, the results. So our project actually deals with data acquisition and signal processing of vital sign signals. So using NI LabVIEW. So we have designed some algorithms like virtual instruments of the heart rate, blood pressure, pulse oximeter. And firstly, blood pressure we have measured using pressure sensors, air cuff and constant air deflating values. Secondly, our own design sensors to measure the oxygen saturation, SpO2, heart rate by using red LED, infrared LED and photodiode. So later on this sensor is connected to the NI deck and measurements were made. So these are the objectives of our project. First, to acquire vital signs, physiological parameters using biosensors, and we have interfaced the obtained data with the NI deck system, which converts this analog data into the digital form. And later on, we have linked the data acquisition system with the LabVIEW software and design algorithms to measure real-time data in the graphical user interface, GUI. Finally, we design and develop a graphical user interface in LabVIEW to display their outputs. So blood pressure is one of the vital sign monitor that we have used this by using the sensors available in our laboratory. And this is the methodology of the blood pressure. And these are the normal pulse oximeter. So mostly pulse oximeter is a device used to measure the oxygen level in our blood. And so in this pulse oximeter, so this is our design. We have designed some of the prototype where we are using red LED, infrared LED and the photo sensor in order to measure the SpO2. And these are the current devices that are available in the market. So this is cost effective. This is the heart rate. Also we have measured the heart rate with our prototype. These are the normal ranges that of the different category of the patients. And this blood pressure. This is the mechanism of the blood pressure. So SpO2 and heart rate mechanism that consists of red light emitting diode and infrared light diode and photodiode, phototransistor. So we have used this in the hardware, and this is our hardware prototype that we have designed, where this is red LED and infrared LED, and the finger placement we can able to measure SpO2 and heart rate, and then later on we can interface with the NI deck to acquire, this is NI LabVIEW. So NI, National Instrument Corporation, is an American company that produces automated testing equipment, virtual instrument software that is used in the laboratory for practical work for the students. So this is this based on block diagram, front panel. This is our DAG system available in our laboratory. So data acquisition system that converts the analog measurements into the digital values and processing with minimum noise and artifacts. So sensors that converts physical parameters to the electrical signals, and these electrical signals are converted to digital converters. So converts the electrical signal to digital value and vice versa. So these are our algorithms that we have designed. So first of all, enter the name of the patient and the age. So by inflating the cuff up to 180 millimeter mercury, then wait until cuff is deflated up to 30 millimeter mercury. Then signal is acquired and sent for the computation. So whether it's systolic or diastolic to measure this, and they are stored in the form Excel. So after 30 seconds, so the red LED on, the photo detector that detects the data, and there is a further computation occurs, then red LED off, and after 5 seconds, infrared LED on and photo detector detects the data. So the IR infrared LED that becomes off. So further computation occurs by calculating the SpO2 level and heart rate, and they are stored in the patient name and age of that particular patient, and they are displayed and saved in the MS Microsoft Excel. If they are abnormal or the values are, then again we have to proceed for the, so there is a user interface. So this user interface, so this to get the name and the age of the user, of the patient, and the prompt user, using prompt user for the input. So in order to acquire the type of the data and this is a blood pressure algorithm that we have designed in our laboratory. Our students that practically they have worked in the lab view actually. So data acquisition system, by using this is 180 degree blood pressure. If it's greater than 180, then measurements are being carried out, and after it's below 30 millimeter mercury, then it will stop the measurements of the blood pressure. So acquiring data until pressure drops up to 30 millimeter mercury. So this is algorithm that we have designed for the blood pressure, and further computations on acquiring this data, and that are also carried out in the LabVIEW software. And this is the whole VI that we have designed for the blood pressure. And this is another VI for the SpO2 and heart rate. So turn on the red LED, acquire and compute the data, and this is the ratio that is being calculated, AC component versus DC, AC for the heart rate and DC for the SpO2. And the second time, turn off the red LED and turn on the infrared LED, and again acquire and compute the data. And this is for computation of the heart rate portion. So this is the whole VI, virtual instrument. So saving this data in the Excel file. So first of all, acquiring data from the VIs and displayed it, and saving data in the Microsoft Excel, and options to try again. And there is a front panel that is of the NI LabVIEW in order to display the value of systolic, diastolic, heart rate, even the name of the patient and the age, and the pulse of SpO2. So this is the whole appended signal of the blood pressure that we acquired, and this is the systolic value and diastolic value of the students that was being supervised under my supervision. So they have worked out this experiment. So these are the results that we have saved in the Excel. So this is low cost real-time vital sign monitoring and easy to share and store in the Excel file, and it can be used in a user-friendly environment or even home environment, and can be used in rural or remote areas. So no need for particular atmosphere. A user or patient can check vital sign routinely or in case any abnormality occurs. So even user may contact with available experts, doctor using telemedicine. So thank you very much. Actually the cost of this prototype, that is about hardly, I think about 50 rupees. 10 rupees we got the red LED, and in 10 rupees we purchase the infrared LED and a photo detector in 20 rupees. And this prototype that we have designed is quite cost effective, and we can able to interface this with a DEC, NI DEC, National Instrument in our laboratory. NI instrument from USA. It's a telemedicine platform where we can, everyone can able to design such type of sensors and can interface and design the VIs and to get the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. Before we proceed, can I ask the organizers whether we could have the signal back on this? It's impossible for us to sit here and watch the screens at the back. In addition to which, we have brought all the speakers up onto the podium, which is kind of an unfair thing to do because we are stuck here for the next hour. But at least we could, if we could get the picture back on the screen over here, that would be good. We're not able to, we missed half the talk out here because we weren't able to see the screens. Anyway, it's going to be possible? I'm not getting a signal on this screen, the one that we can look at. That's particularly relevant to those of us who practice in resource-poor areas. And it has long been a proposition that delivering healthcare at home would go a long way towards bridging the gap between patients needing healthcare and patients being able to access them. And to address this issue today, we have an interesting speaker, Dr. Vishal Dakhar, who is a founder and CEO of Health at Home Private Limited. He is based from Kathmandu. He comes all the way from Nepal, which, if I understand right, would probably be the kind of country where something like this would be in huge demand, because for those of us who've been there, we know that outside of the major urban areas, accessibility in Nepal is a huge problem. He is the founder of this organization, and it's an innovative social enterprise in healthcare service delivery. It happens to be one of the few organizations of its kind, and Dr. Dakhar will be talking to us now about his experience with home care, a new avenue for healthcare services and information technologies, a story from Nepal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. He has given my intro and you know roughly what I do. It's called Health at Home, and we have 5 principles. I will directly go into the presentations because our clock is definitely made for only 60 seconds. That's what Sir has told me in the morning. So we have 5 values of healthcare that we have derived ourselves as a mantra. It's care, compassion, confidentiality, comfort, and customized for the individual need. So compassion is what I carry along as being from the land of Buddha. So that I can relate to. So this is the topic of our presentation today. It is a new avenue for healthcare services and information technology. And that is a provider perspective. It's not a technological development perspective. So I represent a different end of the user base. I would like to talk about how we see it and how we can enhance with the IT technology. My talk will be, it's quite a big topic to talk about in a home care. When we talk about it, it's a totally different vertical. It has a lot of layers, and there is a lot of technology involved in it. So to summarize it in 10 minutes will be pretty difficult, but I would fastly go through the slides that I have, which has a little bit difficult pictures to go through, but it is a reality that we have to face in healthcare, that we have to manage. So taking a news clip from recent days, Mandela is either there's a Mandela or some war news, but Nelson Mandela especially captivates me because he represents the home care value, because he's been in and out of the hospital all the time, and he has been recently discharged after multiple months of stay in a hospital which was unfruitful. Now he's back home, and people, all of them are relieved, including his wish to be in home when he was dying. So this is a New York Times clip which has his home has been refurbished, has been outlined. It's just to make it relevant. So there are myths related to home care, and it's like it competes with the conventional healthcare. It is inefficient service delivery model. Protocol is not there in home care. It's equal to nursing agency only. It is it only caters to the old folks and the old age people who are dying. Home care is only for rich and affordable people, and home care is not needed in daily life. These are the regular myths that we face, as I faced when I started off 4 years back, when we were the few first who were moving into this kind of services in subcontinent. So this is another example of our care, where we had a cancer care, and then there is another who passed away, and then there is another case of a young girl who had an XDR TB after there was a third line medication that was done in a home with the help of N95 mask. So it was very contagious, and it was very, very difficult for us to administer, but we did it, and she is surviving, and she has written a letter to us. That's an example of work diversity that we have. So how it works for the hospital, which is relevant to most of you because you are all from the environment of hospital, it decreases workload for people, it is increased patient care concentrations, it increases bed cycle, and improves quality of care. That is very important for us in these days. What is our capacity at the moment? When I started alone. I was one person. I started as a startup. Now we have like 5 in-house staff, 30 people working for us, paramedics, doctors, physiotherapists, everyone involved. And it is kind of a prototype that is being explored, and it's exploding in a big market like India, China, and other places all across the world. But it was 4 years before when I started, so it was pretty tough and difficult for me to negotiate my position. And it is cradle to grave service. It is not associated as a business. Well, I mean, it is evolving as a social enterprise. This is the first health at home kit. It was a difficult pregnancy. We did it. So this is the first kit that we delivered. This is a big Lama Rinpoche who was admitted in hospital in Kathmandu, and he came back home with big bed sore, and he was semi-conscious, and we had to take care. He passed away, but he was in his comfort zone. This is a conventional care model that we had, and this is what we have changed. This is a regular lady with a cardiac failure with increased JVP. If there's someone clinicians over here, you can see it. And we manage it in home, and we send a doctor, and then the doctor evaluated the case, gave a Lasix, everything was fine. This is a regular COPD case. This is an ICU kind of complex medical management service that we did. There's a multiple parameter, even a Wi-Fi enabled AFib monitoring kit was availed, and we were doing AFib monitoring. These are the kind of equipments and services that we integrate. It is ECG, it's X-rays, all these things that we do. So it can be an independent care model, which is independent, and it can complement existing services and enhance healthcare service. So for that we received, we started on 2009, we received in December 2012, we received Social Entrepreneurship Award on national level. And this is an Indian social entrepreneur, Dr. Ashwin Naik, if you know. Then there is problems that we face. This is a two-part, I mean, I try to do my presentations in two parts. One is for the service delivery model that we have, and how IT can cooperate, and how IT can enhance the virtual capacity or control mechanism for the whole system. So taking our experience with that, now we have a real-time problem because we are bigger, we are better, and people expect us to be much more responsible. So we had a lot of issues regarding HR management, vital monitoring, monitoring quality, patient communication, payment management, all these things. So we started using a lot of telephony was there, a lot of emails we are using it. We have a lot of Skype video conferencing with the patients in a real time. So there's a lot of technology involved, but it is also important for us, it has to have our own core competency. So we started developing our own software platform where we integrate unique kind of work environment. So MIS is in making, and we are getting closer to it. So for Indian ecosystem or the healthcare, there's quite a few things that is relevant to us. One is a non-invasive hemoglobin monitor, which is being done by the Indian guy in Mumbai. And there is a AliveCore, which is related to Vinod Khosla himself, who invested in it. And there's a V-scan from GE, and then there is about 16-panel blood testing machine. So what all these things has in common is like all they are compact, very compact to be brought into the home. So these things, what medical diagnostics, simple non-invasive procedures, except from surgeries and intensive care, we are going to see a lot of home care services integrated into the care with all these capacities. So we need, these are the few folks who are doing innovations and supporting it. He has developed, Mishkin has developed a non-invasive hemoglobin monitoring machine, which is very relevant for the low-cost people, and the Vinod Khosla is sponsoring a AliveCore machine for the ECG monitoring for AFib, which is very much applicable. So, but I would like to end my small presentation with saying what Vinod Khosla says about like 80% of the healthcare is going to be done by the machines, and all of these machines, I would like to add on, is going to be operated from home and by the individual users. Thank you very much. And I have a small presentation on our work, which we can show as how we work in a ground reality. Thank you very much.
Kind of are aware of and sympathize with, patient follow-up is notoriously poor in this country. And to address this issue of post-operative care and long-term follow-up using telemedicine as an option, we now have the next speaker, Dr. Anjali Mishra, who is an endocrine surgeon from the Sanjay Gandhi PGI in Lucknow. She is one of the first people to get a postdoctoral certificate in endocrine surgery. And in this context, probably I think it's also worth mentioning she belongs to a very distinguished group of people headed by no less than Atul Gawande. I'm sure the audience is all aware of who Atul Gawande is and all the landmark work that he's done with checklists, and he too is an endocrine surgeon. So she comes from an Augustine group of endocrine surgeons, and she's going to talk to us about this important issue of post-operative care and how we can use telemedicine.
Thank you, Chairman, for the kind introduction. And at the outset, as is evident by my introduction, I am not a technical person, and my talk would be from the user perspective only. I am an ordinary surgeon, and my encounter with the technology is how I can use it to deliver patient care. So far as today's topic, which I am going to talk about, post-operative care or tele-follow-up as we usually call it. Since I believe this is a mixed audience, though it is a very enlightened one, the reasons for post-operative visit or visits after surgery are many. And among these are, one is patient wants to visit back hospital for wound and general care, for suture or stitches removal, to look at the wound condition, whether there is complication associated with the wound in the form of pain, infection, bleeding, general nutrition advice, and medication doses adjustment after surgery. And one of the important reasons is to get biopsy or histology report, as we call in medical term. And depending on those reports, the visit may have discussion about further treatment planning, whether the patient requires any form of adjuvant treatment or not. And last but not the least, in certain situations and conditions like chronic diseases, and if the patient belongs to having malignant disease group, then patient would need to visit hospital for long term and in some cases lifelong. So what are the issues involved with these visits? It's very easy to gather that there are obvious inconvenience and anxiety associated with these visits. There are issues of financial losses, vaka losses, leave issues, and especially with our specialty where we deal with major number of the patients who are women, when there are so many domestic and social issues involved, and patients tend to skip these visits. And this results in inadequate follow-up care, and so far as this thing, our hospital is concerned, since it's being a major teaching and research hospital, as a doctor we are always interested to know what was the outcome of our intervention. If we want to start certain new form of the treatment, we are very much interested so that patient comes back to us and we know what was the result of a particular intervention which we started, or what was the long-term natural history of a particular disease. So does telemedicine has an answer? It has certainly been established in form of medical conditions like telecardiology and telerheumatology, teleneurology. However, surgery is an acute event in anybody's life. So far as telefollow-up is concerned, this facility is still in emerging and evolving mode. So in this direction, we have taken an initiative and we planned a pilot study. This pilot study was basically planned with the help of School of Telemedicine Bioinformatics situated in SGPGI Lucknow, and this was supported by Department of Information and Technology and ISRO. This was basically undertaken to assess the feasibility of telefollow-up in postoperative cases of thyroid and parathyroid diseases, and to establish the indications of these visits and to know the outcome in the term of patients' financial and work hour savings and the satisfaction perceived by them. This study was conducted between April 2004 and December 2007. Follow-up data of the patient operated at our center, and whosoever had consented to report at the telemedicine center at Cuttack for teleconsultation was analyzed. It's very important to know that our center is a major tertiary referral center in North. Therefore, the patient visit our center from very far off places, and one of the state situated in the east, Odisha, is somewhere between 1500 to 2000 kilometers from our hospital. So we chose that particular state because the telemedicine center Cuttack at that state, they consented to partake in this study. So therefore, we have included in this pilot study only the patients who were hailing from that particular state. In this, we have noted down the nature of surgery and the reason of the consultation, and a questionnaire was provided to the patient to assess their satisfaction, financial saving and leave saved. We have used real-time interaction and storage and forward method for these teleconsultations. The exact procedure was that first telefollow-up appointment was fixed at the time of the discharge after explaining the procedure to the patients. On the day of the appointment, telemedicine staff contacted the senior resident in endocrine surgery department. Patient's record and required reports, example, biopsy report was retrieved from hospital information system and placed in the file. This is the exact procedure. The doctor is sitting in the telemedicine center at our hospital, and the patient is sitting at the remote station in Cuttack. And like for this patient, she was discharged and she has come to retrieve her histology report. You can see that the report has turned out to be minimally invasive follicular thyroid cancer. So that is a form of the thyroid cancer. Thereafter, the patient was called for the repeat operation, and after completing that operation, the patient is still on telefollow-up because this is a form of very low risk cancer, and the patient could be followed up with telemedicine facility. She need not to come back to us for physical visits every time, and for this surveillance of this cancer, patient has to only have estimation of one particular tumor marker. So she has got it done, and that was found to be normal, and she continued to be on visit, and we provide him appropriate advice at each follow-up. So this you could see is the fourth follow-up record of the same patient. At the end of the study, we could conclude that the major reasons for post-operative visits so far as our specialty was concerned was for retrieval of the report, dosage adjustment and for cancer surveillance. So far as financial implications are concerned, it was huge from the patient point of view, and depending on the class they were traveling in and the hotel they were staying in, you could see this was the cost we had calculated, and per patient saving was 4,000 rupees. However, we could not exactly calculate the cost effectiveness from the hospital point of view because this was the not primary intent of this project. Outcome in the form of patient satisfaction was very good, and most of the patients said that they would prefer this follow-up visit over physical visits. So that at the end of this study, we concluded that there are obvious reasons for doubting the sustainability of many telehealthcare programs in India, but according to us, it is feasible in a subset of the patient. And after we could publish this study in Journal of Telemedicine and Telecare, and after that we are continuing to provide this kind of the facility, and we have expanded indication of this telefollow facility to other kind of patient also. And so far as we have 90 patients in our telefollow program, and the median number of the visit incurred by these patients is more than 5, and more than 1/5 patient have been coming for these telefollow visits for more than 2 years. However, the indication of the telefollow continues to change, and in short term patient would be primarily visiting us for the histology reports. However, for long term visits, these are mainly for tumor surveillance and medication dosage adjustment. As I said that I am an endocrine surgeon, but to my mind, these same facility could be applied to the surgeries which are clean and low risk surgery like laparoscopic cholecystectomy, hernia surgery, skin and superficial surgery, and benefit we could judge is that it permits better resource utilization, early and safe discharge, can support rural, remote and mobile surgery, and good follow-up is ensured. So in conclusion, we believe that telefollow facility could play an important role in improving healthcare delivery system in our country. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. In the clinical scenario, we see this all the time, particularly in endocrine surgery, where patients have to go through a lot of time and trouble for what is essentially a 2-minute transaction. And as you rightfully point out, a lot of times you only need to look at a lab value or twiddle one dose or something of that nature, for which the cost saving, as you can show, especially to an Indian, that's a huge amount of cost saving that can be implemented by appropriate use of telemedicine. It was a nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions. We move along to the next speaker, who has the same last name as me, but I can assure you he is here on his own merits. He's not here because he's nowhere related to me. The same last name, but not related. We now have Dr. Rajagopalan, who comes from a very well-known center in Chennai. He's the Vice President of Information Technology at Mediscan Systems, probably the oldest and one of the largest implementers and users of ultrasound technologies in this country, maybe even in the world. He's an expert in business transformation initiatives using IT and has worked with several multinational companies. What he's going to be talking about today is really a very, very interesting experience of how you can do what's called telementoring. Teaching people, training people on technologies using telemedicine and IT technologies. And we will now have Mr. Rajagopalan talk to us about this topic.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the organizing committee for getting us here together. I think it's a great platform. I think marriage of IT and healthcare is the most essential thing, and India is the most for solving healthcare problems in India. This is essential, and that is what actually we are all here for. And what I'm going to be talking here is in terms of ICT and ultrasound, to kind of have basically started to get it into the periphery, and that is in rural Tamil Nadu, and they're starting to make a difference there. Basically, to give a background, as Dr. Arjun has already said, so Mediscan is one of the most advanced fetal medicine centers in the country today, started by Professor and Dr. Suresh and Dr. Indrani Suresh, and basically with 31 years of highly specialized fetal care services they've been offering. They've been the first institute which has been accredited in Asia by the Fetal Medicine Foundation UK for providing training. And basically it's become a tertiary reference center for ultrasound and fetal medicine in Southeast Asia. What is different is basically the directors, Dr. Suresh and Dr. Indrani Suresh, are basically very passionate teachers, and whatever the learning that they've gone through in the 30 years, they wanted to give it out back to the community, and that's what this initiative is about. And we're proud to say that over 5,000 students have passed out from these institutes, and basically they've been setting up their institutes, they're setting up their own centers all over the country today, which are starting to become a similar sort of institutes in the country. And so this project that I'm going to talk about is called SCAN SHS. So what is SCAN SHS? SCAN is basically comes from Mediscan, and SHS is basically State Health Society. So basically this is a project that's come up from the public-private on the PPP model, and we're working with the state government of Tamil Nadu and the National Rural Health Mission to basically improve the skill levels of medical officers in primary health centers of Tamil Nadu in the usage of ultrasound for perinatal screening, antenatal screening for early detection of fetal abnormalities. So I think birth defects are a global problem, and 70% of these birth defects are actually preventable, and in many of these cases the treatment, if it's detected, if the birth defects are detected early, then there are also conditions where they could be treated, and so it could be potentially life-saving as well as a treatable condition. So this is where we wanted to use technology, and director being very passionate about technology, way back in the 90s itself we started implementing technology in our practice basically, and it is becoming a modality of choice for ultrasound practitioners or sonologists in the country. So it's a very specialized software about which I'll be talking later in the presentation. So what are the goals of this project? So basically offer a viable healthcare training program for healthcare practitioners in Tamil Nadu, and we wanted to focus on 4 or 5 major defects. These 5 defects contribute to about 70% of the anomalies, and we wanted the medical officers to basically detect these anomalies or at least notice these anomalies and then send an alert to the specialist so that there could be some intervention that could be possible. And how do we do that? We thought we would offer a blended learning mechanism, which would be a face-to-face learning combined with an online e-learning which they could go on, and then there could be an online audit. Basically it is a continuous audit. So that's the system of audit for continuous evaluation of skill levels. So it's just not a one-time training and then you go back. It's basically a continuous evaluation for a period of 1 year. So we have gone through this exercise and we are in the 2nd year, and so we have a set of medical officers of more than about 200 of them who have been trained through the system. Then specifically when in terms of anomalies and in terms of what do they do, so there is SMS alarms that are basically sent in for specialist intervention, then they coordinate, that happens, and then finally there is a demonstration of the skills and then the validation of the skill set. Again the software comes into play wherein the performance analysis statistics are taken and then graphically displayed, and so basically the data and figures are already there in the system over a period of time. So there were certain challenges basically in terms of ultrasound availability in all the PHCs and that is the primary health centers. Basically the underutilization, the lack of training, no proper accreditation mechanism, and basically the doctors were the limited amount of time basically that they had wherein we needed to train them. We had to basically provide training at that appropriate level. So you could not treat them as fetal medicine practitioners and give them training at that level. So your training material, the way you do the training has to be simplified. So a very simplified approach called the rule of 3 was established. These locations were geographically dispersed, again wherein technology played a big role in getting us together, and then the periodic audit and verifiable program. So the approach was basically we identified the PHCs, we gave an orientation session, then they took an online theoretical course, there was a hands-on training by accredited trainers, then an online audit of images as I told you. So this is basically the entire, so the workflow depicted pictorially in terms of sensitization, the theory course and how the whole workflow builds up. From a technical perspective, this was how so you have an ultrasound machine at the primary health centers, wherein through DICOM or the other mechanism, it has the images and the reports had to be pushed up, and then we had to basically send it to a remote server for the specialist opinion and reporting. So as I told you that this is a specialized software that we developed and which has become a standard modality of choice for sonologists in the country. And what it does is basically in terms of the demographics, so basically population specific data in terms of it has become very critical. So if you're looking at Indian population, the Indian birth weight, all this data needs to go into the system. So that's where the software does. It has birth charts, it has options for pregnancy dating, for fetal growth, and then the expert alerts and the statistical reports, as I said. So there are certain important fundamentals which needs to be followed basically in whenever you in a pregnancy tracking, and so it is very similar to what we do in a live case after we are born. So basically if we go to a doctor, he asks what is your age. Similarly, if you go for the fetus, we need to ask what is the age. So that is basically the gestational age, and the dating of the pregnancy needs to be done. And then after some time you go to the doctor, there are certain milestones that happen, so you need to see whether your growth is as per the milestone. Similarly, for the baby, the growth charts have to be plotted. That's what the software does. And every fetus has its own potential to grow. So and that is where a structured training. So it may be a constitutionally small fetus, but there is no need to panic, because if you have a particular software to track the growth, and then you can be reasonably assured that it's growing well, even though it's a constitutionally small fetus. So this is how the anomalies are basically reported. The images are uploaded. There is a standard parameters that we have defined, very simple parameters, measurable parameters on which we can go back and tell the trainee medical officers on how they are performing. So this is an alert that they receive. So this is the final evaluation report that we get. Basically, how many images they have sent for auditing, what are the anomalies detection, and if you see in terms of anomalies, there is a further classification in terms of what is this type of anomaly that have been detected. So this is where we stand. We've got 15 districts, 252 doctors in the primary health centers, which are in each primary health centers there's 2 doctors. There are 64,000 cases which we have audited, and around 600 anomalies that has been detected. There has been reported by the primary health center, and then subsequent management has happened. So this is how the statistics actually pan out. To conclude, this is a very unique program. It's a first of its kind educational program for healthcare practitioners to improve their skills in fetal imaging and early detection of fetal anomalies. This is what our directors are very passionate about. I think this is a very scalable program. We have implemented it in Tamil Nadu, and it can be taken out to other places. And this is a unique program for capacity building. I think as we have a scarcity of experts in the country, so we need to develop a very good talent pool of physicians who can basically scale up. So at every level, if we have experts to do a particular kind of activity, then they can refer it to the next level, the next level, and the next level, and that's how we can build up this capacity. So appropriate use of technology can significantly improve the quality of healthcare delivery, especially in rural India where there is a huge scarcity of specialized practitioners. So I think with that I would like to end my session and I thank again the organizing committee and the chair for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rajagopalan, for giving us an insight into what has been an absolutely fantastic demonstration of how you can leverage technology to be able to recruit local talent, which is really not that well trained, to be able to do such a large intervention with a huge impact. Some of you who ever go to Chennai should go and visit this center to see the way it's been implemented. It's totally outstanding. Kind of a pity that Dr. Suresh, who was the innovator, and I'm not taking this away from you, you did a great job, couldn't be here this morning. He was scheduled to speak, but because he's not been well, he couldn't show up. I'm sure there will be questions on this too. We move along now to the last speaker for the day. Keep the best for the last, as always. Dr. Anita Jain is an Indian editor with the British Medical Journal. Those of you who read the BMJ would know that in recent months, the BMJ has started and launched a very large initiative with India as a focus. She writes on healthcare practice and policy scenarios in India, and as part of her editorial responsibilities, she gives talks to doctors on how to research and how to effectively publish, a very uphill task, if I may say so. She will talk today on the use of ICT in information technologies in primary care. As an interesting aside, I'm also told that she's a marathon runner. This is a great interest to me because I have two other siblings in their 50s, both of whom are marathon runners. I prefer to stand by and watch, I don't run. But anyway, we would like to hear from you on your perspective on primary care.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just start off with some grim statistics maybe, but we have 63 million diabetics, 120 million patients with hypertension, nearly 22 million patients with ischemic heart disease. 1 in 3 men smoke, which accounts for nearly 1 million deaths each year, 24 million cases of chronic pulmonary disease, 800,000 new cancer cases detected each year, more than 70% in advanced stages, and 1 in 4 families has a member with a mental or behavioral disorder, more than 90% of whom remain untreated. So like it or not, we have the making of a sick nation. And I'm sure you'll agree that most of these diseases won't present in isolation. A patient with coronary heart disease is likely to require medications for diabetes, dyslipidemia, and hypertension, in addition to those that directly protect the heart. And he or she is likely to struggle to adhere to the complex treatment regimen alongside maintaining a balanced diet and regular exercise. Multimorbidity, that is having multiple chronic conditions, has come to be the new normal by middle age amongst Indians, and with dreadful consequences. Chronic diseases account for nearly half of all deaths in India. So caring for patients with multimorbidity presents unique challenges due to the long-term nature of care and the diverse needs of patients at different time points. And primary care services located closest to the patient have an integral role to play in ensuring coordination and continuity of care for patients with multimorbidity. So this continuity has two aspects to it. One is an informational continuity, so that all caregivers have access to all the necessary information about the patient at the point of care. And IT has a significant role to bring in efficiencies there by helping us move from paper-based records to electronic health records and case management tracking systems, which are accessible to the different care providers managing the patient. A lot of speakers have spoken about the different technologies, and we've surely heard about mHealth. So a mobile-based solution which is being piloted in some regions of India is to shift specific healthcare tasks to community health workers who are less costlier than say having a doctor there, and they actually feed in data about key health parameters of the patient, fitness levels, drug compliance into a mobile device, and the information is then transmitted to a computer in the health center for longer term monitoring. A variety of patient self-management tools have also come into the picture, such as web-based apps, smartphone apps, which automatically record data from the patient about, again, their health parameters or the fitness activities on a day-to-day level, so that the doctor and the patient can be involved together in planning the care. So that is about informational continuity. So you have a flow of information from the patient to the different providers. The second aspect of continuity of care is a management continuity, which is so that a patient has a seamless experience of care from, say, the community health worker to the family doctor or general practitioner to the variety of specialists or other social support services that they may need at any point of time, and back to the family doctor and the community caregivers who ensure long-term management of the patient. And such a collaborative care model with enhanced interprofessional communication is the fulcrum of services to order the chaos for patients with multimorbidity. And interprofessional communication can be facilitated through low-tech solutions such as just phones or emails between the different providers, or actually very complex interventions such as telemedicine or live video conferencing, examples of which we've seen here today, which will connect rural satellite locations to urban hubs or primary care providers to specialist doctors. So as my title, the title of my talk actually is Evidence from Implementation, and I looked up the research on this. I looked up Cochrane reviews, the research published in some of the top medical journals, and what's the evidence of such collaborative care models which are centered on IT. And the biggest challenge actually is the lack of long-term evidence on health outcomes and process of care measures. So do these systems really lead to better control of blood sugars in patients? Do they really lead to increased adherence to an exercise regimen? Are patients satisfied with the care? Are doctors, is it acceptable to doctors? Does it fit in well with the workflow? Are there any cost efficiencies, any barriers to adoption? We really don't have real concrete answers to this, and I really congratulate some of the speakers who actually are looking at such outcomes, who have done research, who are not just implementing but are also collecting data on how does this actually work. The lack of answers does not, however, detract from the need for such IT systems that enhance continuity of care. And the tiered healthcare system in India with providers and patients at different levels really offers a lot of scope for them to interact more effectively and not function in silos. And as India moves towards having a health information management system with a computer in every primary health center by 2017, it is very pertinent that we explore such technological solutions, we experiment them, we study them, we document them in detail so that it fosters its adoption on a larger scale. Right, that's it from me, thank you. I've finished in 5 minutes, I still have 5 minutes. I'm a marathon runner. If I was a dancer, I could have done something more creative, but thank you all for your attention.